only 60% recommend the NHS as a workplace to go to, and only 65% recommend it as a place to receive care. It does feel at the minute that we have taken our eye off the ball in certain areas about that preventative, good public health, social-based prevention. I think we've been too improvement focused, not innovative focused enough, and that actually that's acted as a fettering of ambition.
Welcome to Engage Care Talent, and we are delighted today to invite back the mighty Dean Malpass. Last time we spoke to him, he was talking about running for Prime Minister, but I think he bottled out at the last minute because I didn't see his vote on my slip. However, he is back to dissect the Lord Darzi report, and I think you'll find this quite interesting with his tongue-in-cheek, provocative points of view.
This episode started on LinkedIn again, didn't it? I think about the NHS report.
My first thought is that the speed of which this report was facilitated, given the change of government. If you think about some of the other, our government, I think it's probably fair to say, irrespective of which colour party is in power at the given time, isn't necessarily known for speed. We've waited decades for certain reports and certain inquiries, yet this one seemed to have been, the ink was dry and approved to mutual satisfaction within, 5 weeks?
We have just done an episode, right, speaking to someone about AI in healthcare. So are you saying that maybe this was, write me a report to click?
I mean, I suppose I will say categorically I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that I think the report was pre-prepared.
Yes, yeah, I reckon so, yeah.
I don't. I'll tell you why I think that, and I'm happy to be corrected. Should Lord Darzi or anyone in government want to come back and factually correct me, I'm happy for that. But let me tell you why I have a deep-seated suspicion. When I worked in the NHS, just doing patient safety investigations, so to Chris. You may not know. Typically speaking, where there's a death or a serious incident, the NHS contract says that there has to be a patient safety investigation that uses a systems-based analysis under something called PSERF. That's just the framework for which it has to be done. Now, when I was assigned these in the NHS, a general expectation really was that you would go from being assigned to having the first draft done within, now quick would be 2 months. 6 weeks to 2 months was quick. If it was particularly labour intensive, i.e. there were lots of people to interview, lots of family involvement, maybe you needed to go and look at different pieces of gut, it wasn't uncommon for that to push closer to 6 months. So one incident, one investigation process, quick 2 months. Average for a big piece 6 months. They can go on much longer. Yet we have the Lord Darzi report in 6 weeks that apparently takes a systemic, root and branch systemic approach into all the ills of the NHS. I want to be on that team, is all I'm saying.
Pretty efficient, isn't it? I like that, yeah.
Yeah. So that was my first big takeaway. What did you guys think from your perspective? Because you and I probably approach these reports from a slightly different perspective. What did you think?
Yeah, I think it was very quick, and I think actually I get it, because if the government feels that things need to be fixed, and actually it's like right now's the time to sort it out, I think it's actually fair enough to do that, to be totally honest. And I think it's something that they can't really wait, because especially with winter coming, I think there needs to be reassurances that actually things are being done. So the language is a bit okay in places. Actually, I was going to say sensations, but actually maybe not really, because actually there is stuff to be solved and problems to be fixed. So, I like the fact it's come out quickly, and actually if it's been done earlier on, fantastic. And you know what, if they use a bit of ChatGPT to refine it, then good on Lord Darzi for embracing technology.
Yeah. I don't disagree with that sentiment at all. I think in our government in waiting, which we I think teased on the first episode that I appeared on in this podcast, we would do the same, right?
I've just got to say, I didn't even realise that was a joke. So I was there waiting for your name to come on the ballot paper when it wasn't. I'm still scratching my head now because I was 2 feet in.
We were just early, Rowan. That was all. We just missed the cutoff.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. When did I say on the LinkedIn post? 20. What did I say? 2030. We're fine.
Yeah. Right. Okay. I must have missed that bit. So the speed of the report coming out. Okay. Language used. All right. But I suppose let's dig into it more because my thing is, is it right? Is it worth its weight in paper?
Well, let's start then with what is said. So I'll go straight to the report for this. So let's look at morale and burnout, which is really the strength of, I think, the content of this podcast. So in the most recent NHS staff reports, only 60% recommend the NHS as a workplace to go to, and only 65% recommend it as a place to receive care. So we've got a very simple, slight majority that's saying, A, it's a good place to work. And I think more concerningly, only 65% of staff working in the NHS think it's a good place to receive care. I mean, your question, Rowan, I think is an excellent one in the sense of, is it worth its weight in paper? Which I think is a great phrase to ask. I would say that when it comes to whether the NHS is a good place to work or not, or is or isn't a good place to receive care, the fact that you have the staff saying that almost half are saying it isn't, that means we've got to take that seriously, I would argue. So that by itself means that if everything else in that report was complete subjecture and, fanciful, imaginary, I don't think it is. I'm not saying that. But even if it were, I think those two bits of data, which are inarguable, they are from the NHS staff survey, would mean that the entirety of the report tells you that we have a huge grease fire that needs addressing. So that was the first bit. I mean, the second one, and again, straight to the report, the NHS faces an £11.6 million backlog in facility maintenance. So that's the infrastructure, the buildings, the corridors, the equipment. £11.6 billion in. So that means that what came through from the report was that puts people off wanting to work there. That kind of, if we don't see these good environments, these efficient environments, these high quality clinical environments, that the perception by staff is that this is not a good place to work and not a good place to receive care. I mean, these numbers to you or I seem staggeringly. We would not want an £11.6 billion water bill, any of us. But when we're thinking about governments and the amount of money that they play with, this is just another piece of accounting that needs to be done. I think governments use figures so that we think that the problem is insurmountable. And I always use this as an example, and people will be fed up of me saying it. We spent 750 million on Eat Out to Help Out. So by that token, 11.6 billion to spend on buildings in the NHS, which is one of the largest bits of state expenditure, to me seems entirely more sensible than 750 on subsidising takeouts in mandatory lockdowns. So now, again, I would not want that as a water bill. And then the third one, and then I'll pause here, is that the report talks about this lack of community expansion of healthcare, that we've become, I use the royal we weren't really involved, but we've become too beholden as a country on hospital-based inpatient care and treatment, and that over the last 10 to 15 years, that there's been a real underinvestment in broadening out that community focused role. And based on kind of what I saw when I was working clinically, when I was managing services, and certainly what I see now from being an independent advisor and consultant, I think that is the case. I think we've somehow gone back to maybe where we were in a previous generation, where we now see hospitals as the epicenter of a healthcare system. And I think that's been at the denigration of a public health model. of healthcare, and we've almost shifted back to that. And I'd be interested actually in both of your perspectives on this. It feels to me as a nurse that we've departed slightly from where we were heading, which was a preventative public health, really complex understanding what causes health and health inequalities. And we seem to have gone back to where we now just have these places that patch people together once they're already injured, harmed, or unwell.
National Sickness Service, as I've heard pacified before, rather than National Health Service.
And hospitals are great for certain things. If you are shot in the shoulder, a community-based service that doesn't have surgeons, blood, x-ray machines, MRIs isn't really going to be much help. Likewise, the community outreach stuff about, gun safety and things like that aren't much help once someone is shot in the shoulder. You have to take a systemic view and think that, well, we only have one person shot in the shoulder out of 100 million, right? Or 100,000 equivalent. So you do need both, but it does feel at the minute that we have taken our eye off the ball in certain areas about that preventative, good public health, social-based prevention.
It's crazy, isn't it? So it's like if my question would be, have we learned nothing? So I'm not that old. I'm 43. I've been kind of in recruitment and associated things for 23 years, something like that. Always been aware of kind of healthcare. It's always been something that's interested me for various reasons. But what it feels like, to my naive point of view, is that the learning gets reset. And I don't know how often it is. Is it with every government? Is it with every change in policy? I don't know what drives it, what causes it, but it feels like the learning gets reset. But instead of taking a bit of learning that we had and then moving it on, it gets reset right to the beginning. It's like, right, so we go right back to when we didn't know anything, or we just knew there was a problem, and we start again from scratch. And you think of all the kind of the investment, the money, the methods, everything that goes into that. And alongside it is the reputation of the sector, the aspiration of working in the sector. It's all gets damaged. And then, when it does get reset, it's like, right, well, we've got this goal to repair the damage, to build a reputation, to sort the community, solutions so that we can bring people out of hospital and care for them properly. But the biggest things that seem so obvious, not just to me, but to most people, I think, are just kind of overlooked. And it becomes like a bigger strategic problem rather than actually on the ground treating people properly, giving them the right support, caring about their jobs and their welfare. And this is the employees I'm talking about, not even the people in the care. Surely there are things that we should have learned over the last 23 years.
Well, I think the NHS has often been termed as like the crown jewels of the welfare state, and I don't think it's treated that way, because actually, it is the change of governments. I think you even had Conservative governments technically change because of changing leadership, and where they've said things need to be fixed. And I think, the change of governments don't help. And it's a shame there's not some proper ring fencing of organisations, institutions, services like the NHS, and make sure there is that constant thinking. I mean, the fact that, going a bit off tangent here, but the fact that how long did it take to have a workforce strategy created by the NHS? 75 years.
Yeah. You're speaking years rather than months, aren't you?
Bonkers. Yeah, bonkers. ChatGPT was definitely not used in that.
You know what though? It is really interesting. So as you both know, I've just spent pretty much the whole of this year living in hospital with my son, and I can't say one bad thing about the NHS. I mean, I can moan about the food maybe, but in certain hospitals. But I tell you what, it was they saved his life, and they've basically saved my family's life, and changed everything for us. That was the NHS, and it is filled with amazing people, absolutely amazing people. And I heard someone very important, very intelligent say recently that the NHS isn't broken. It's not like the NHS isn't broken. It's the funding and where the funds are placed, and it's the communication, and it's the connections between different hospitals. And I'm sure that he could go on and write his own paper, because he's an amazing guy. But it just makes you think, because yeah, it's so much wider than the NHS. It is, community and all that. And having been involved in recruitment in healthcare, a lot of the kind of recruitment activity is at a local level. Where can you walk to your job? You care for people in your own community, and there is a lot of opportunity there, but there's so many mistakes, so many like schoolboy errors that just mean that it doesn't work. Not everywhere. I'm not saying everywhere, but there's shining examples, but you don't really hear about them, do you? You hear about the bad ones.
Yeah.
So let's dive back into the report. What we got? You said you had some more data for us.
Yeah, so we've covered the key changes and staff feedback, morale and burnout, underinvestment in the infrastructure, and the lack of community-based roles and career development that we've spoken about. And last time I mentioned this, but we've got more up-to-date figures. And when you think about the issues in healthcare, we know that we're losing people and that it's hard to retain. But there's always been, I think, this hopeful notion that we can just attract people in and that we'll just have a more junior workforce. Well, unfortunately, the figures from this report don't seem to bear that out. So we've seen a 20% drop since 2021 in student nurse numbers. That means that as of this year, only 13,870 student nurse places were filled, 20% down from 2021. Many reasons for that. There's been a particular drop in mature students and vocational based nursing students, at which one time was a key demographic within the profession. That's pretty much entirely gone now. The other thing, and I think both of you know this is a particular bugbear of mine, that we artificially limit medical student intake. Slight rise here with medical students up to 10,028. But only an increase up to 15,000 by 2031. And the Medical Schools Council have asked for another 5,000 to match workforce needs and attract a larger domestically trained workforce. The problem is, I think we're going to get, who's going to want to come into this sector? Who right now is 18, 19, and it's hard to get into nursing school, and it's hard to get into medical school, and it's hard to get through the course. They're two of the toughest courses that you can study in the English-speaking world. The attrition and the dropout rate for both is very high. So even though we're starting this year, Chris, with 13,870, in 3 years' time, or 2 years if they're on the accelerated postgraduate courses, I would say that we'd be lucky to get 10,000 of them on the register. I think we'll lose at least 3,870. Now, some of them will take career breaks and absences, and they'll be pregnant, and then they'll come back in 2 or 3 years. That's very common. But we're not going to get 13,870 student nurses. I would happily bet the house on that. Medically, you think about socio-demographically, the people that are attracted to medicine historically. They're usually people that have options. They're usually people from families that have means and have options. I'm just thinking, and I'm going to be very stereotypical here, in the middle-class family house of prospective medical students today, what are those conversations like with mum, dad, aunt, uncle, granny, grandpa, retired solicitor, lawyer, doctor? Who's the key advocates advising their would-be prospective medical students, saying this is the career for you? In the way that 20 years ago, it would have been a no-brainer. It was a source of great family pride to have someone in medical school. In English cultures, irrespective of overseas cultures, I have friends in that demographic. They're not advising their children who, I'm sadly getting to that vintage now where I have friends slightly older than me that have children off to university the first time. I coached an under-19s American football team. One has gone to medical school. Shout out to Darab Khan, absolute legend of a guy. He's at Manchester and doing really well. One out of maybe the 100 kids I've coached, usually all quite high performing academically. One. So I think that this report, valid as it is, ends up actually being a huge barrier because it points out the truth. and who's being attracted in, because the money's not great. Let's be honest. A healthcare career is not the career advice you would receive if you said, money is the main thing that motivates me.
Really good point, actually. This is kind of an expose, isn't it? Although not necessarily a massively shocking expose. And it might be that they're doing it kind of upping the edge to it in anticipation of maybe doing something dramatic when it comes to the autumn budget, and what they're going to be doing, Labour government going to be doing in the first 2 years of government. Perhaps you're kind of like going, wow, it is on its knees. What does Keir Starmer say? It's not on its knees, it's on its face. So therefore, this is what's coming. Maybe they're doing it. Maybe that's why they've made it like that. But maybe to the detriment of the PR of various professions in the NHS.
Yeah, I think we're like with anything. It's good to know what the problem is, because you need to know what to fix, and you would then uncover what the opportunity could be. And again, I just speak from personal experience this year. I've probably said this before, maybe not on this podcast, but I was on a bone marrow transplant unit, and there were 8 beds. So I'd wake up in the morning, and there was 8 kids on the ward, basically all fighting for their lives. And then I go down and get a coffee, because I started drinking coffee because I don't know why, but I've never drunk it before. But anyway, that was something happened to me in hospital. And I walk down one set of stairs and I go through the maternity ward. So there's babies everywhere, pregnant mums, happy families, and all that kind of stuff. And then if you go down the other end of the hospital, there's people who are coming to the end of their life, with all sorts of problems. And then even when I take a walk outside, there was homeless people, there was people with all sorts of issues. And, the people that pull all of that together, that care for all of those people, and it's not just those people, it's all of their families, it's the whole of our society, is the healthcare and medical profession. And it is a vocation. It's incredible. Some of the stuff that happens in there is absolutely unbelievable. And I think that, it's not just the job of the NHS to raise the profile of the sector. It's the job of all of us to see the value in it, the value in the people, and to look after the people that do the job, because they are only people. The nurses that I dealt with they're just doing their job in their eyes, and they're saving my whole world, but they're just doing their job. And I think that, there's a bit of an appreciation thing, there's a recognition thing, and there's a whole support structure and a real thought about why people come into the sector, why they stay, why they do well, and how we can make more of that. And I think there is a huge opportunity. That's my view.
And actually, that's like really important when it comes to organisations wanting to have people that are passionate and engaged and want to do a good job, but feel that they are just trying to push water up a hill. So it's, it's, again, like, it goes back to the thing about looking at infrastructure and technology and trying to solve that. And actually, that is a good investment, despite it being a big number. But yeah,
it's true. I think what disappoints the people that work, particularly in the NHS, because I think when you work in one of the independent sectors, you're slightly cocooned from this, because you have a different set of leadership and values and cultures. And even though your revenue will almost entirely come from the NHS these days, or NHS budgets, it does feel differently. So I'm speaking to, is that I think the clinical staff just get overshadowed by the noise that's all around it. So this report comes out, Chris. I think quite rightly, and as Rowan has said, quite admirably, highlights the issues and the challenges. It puts forward very clearly the need for reform, innovation, whatever we want to imagine that as. But then less than a month later, today in the newspapers, the Chancellor is saying that they want to cap medical pensions at £100,000. And currently the cap is at like 234,000. So what that does, for those that don't know, And irrespective of whether you think anyone should be allowed that level of public sector pension is irrelevant. The fact is, it's been happening. What that will mean, guys, is that there's no financial incentive for your most experienced, seasoned doctors to stay. They may as well just go and become private consultants because they can't add to their pension pot anymore. So you see an exit. So the British Medical Association, which of course are a trade union, so will always emphasise the interests of their members, have said that this will lead to an exodus of doctors. Just seems madness, Rowan, based on what you do and your life's work, what it's been. It just seems madness that we'll keep. Is now the time really to do that? That it's really the money that's going to be saved in that. Is that going to plug that, what was it, 11.6 billion pound capex backlog? Is that where we're going to take this money from?
It's crazy. It's crazy, isn't it?
Like the snake that eats itself when hungry.
Yeah, it'll go on for a few years around that monopoly board, and then guess what? It'll reset. And it'll probably get changed again, but it'll be too late. It's frightening.
So, have we got any other? What else have we got then, Dean? Have we got any other?
So the recommendations. So particularly when attracting talent. So we need financial support and flexible programs. So stop them when this sounds like something that we used to do. So this is from the reverse the decline in nursing students, expanding tuition assistance. Well, remember the NHS bursary that we took away and made nurses pay £10,000 a year to become nurses and bits and pieces. Well, there's a suggestion that maybe we might want to bring that back, along with maintenance grants. Remember when we used to have those also, and flexible study options. That one's somewhat new. I think a great idea. The NMC, when it sets its pre-reg nursing workforce standards, is very strict about the hours where people have to be. So 1,400 hours of practice, 1,400 hours of theory. But there is some discretion now. And I think with one of the good unintended consequences of COVID is that people are more remotely affixed in their mindsets to learning and engagement. So I think there's an option there that could definitely help. Career development and leadership pathways. I mean, this could just be a client for one of Rowan's businesses, couldn't it? This is exactly what Rowan would be saying. Talk to me what life is like as a doctor in your organisation. Tell me about the career development and leadership pathways. And then he'd start extrapolating that and the employer brand and value prop and mapping it all out. Well, Lord Darzi has clearly been to one of your seminars, Rowan, because we're talking about structured career development, mentorship, clear leadership pathways, make healthcare roles more attractive, offering growth opportunities within the NHS, appeals to younger professionals and supports long-term retention. I thought we knew, like, I read this thinking that I'm the problem here, because I thought that's what we'd been doing. So that's my fault, and I need to be better because I've let everyone down. And then, guys, and this is where I'll lean on your expertise far better than mine. We've got investment in technology and infrastructure. So just in terms of technology, I think it's probably somewhat fair to say that healthcare isn't always at the vanguard of adopting and utilising advancements in technology. I think clinical technology is fairly good, particularly in areas like surgery and cancer. Not necessarily always that good in, let's say, IT infrastructure.
I mean, the thing is, though, I mean, obviously the budget numbers are big, but that's a relatively straightforward fix in terms of going, when someone goes in the morning, start a shift, they can access their computer easily, log in very quickly, and up and away. End of shift, reverse. That is obviously there's a big outlay there, but talking about your several billions of pounds, that is a drop in the ocean, but actually would make a massive difference, because again, they feel that people feel they're not pushing water up a hill because their lives are just a little bit easier. So the technology is such a broad thing, but on its simplest level, it can just be about making sure people can turn their blooming computers on and then to work properly.
So they've pledged. I've just actually used ChatGPT for this. It's 3.4 billion this year pledged to modernising IT infrastructure and digital transformation. So you're right on the money. Well, literally right on the money there, Chris. I think, and again, I'd be interested to know what you guys think about this. So I, particularly with like my American clients and colleagues, I'm often summoned to these webinars, interviews, consulting areas where they're promising me that AI is the solution to everything from managing rotas, which I think it has some great value in, but all the way through to like, making cups of tea and making sure that someone's warmly tucked up in a post-op bed, which I don't think it has any great role in, to be honest. And these people, normally they're chief execs and salespeople, and they're telling me that, but not one of them yet has been able to show me how it can run a mental health inpatient ward, but I'm hoping that technology will come. I think there's a great opportunity, particularly in the area of diagnostics when it comes to AI. I don't know enough about specific diagnostics, in per illness and morbidity, but I think overall, what I would be confident in is that where you have objective tests to prove certain things. So if you think about physical healthcare, I often look at my colleagues that have spent their lives in physical healthcare with a degree of what's the word, like melancholy, because in my world it's all just, looks like schizophrenia to me, and that's about as extensive really as the diagnostic process for psychiatry has ever got. I'm being tongue-in-cheek, please don't write in. Now, medical, like physical medical diagnostics, it's phenomenal. I like really, and the advancements year on year are really, really good. Now, I am more confident that if you program something sensibly and you have a good eye reviewing it, that actually when it comes to objective diagnostic markers, AI will actually make fewer mistakes of diagnosis than what a tired doctor or nurse practitioner or consultant will. And I think there's great public and patient benefit from that. So, and it's relatively cost effective, because really at the front end, it's how you program it. You make sure that the error and validity. People will say, "Oh, yes, but what about when it makes mistakes?" And I'll say, quite respectfully, people make way more mistakes in this area.
We've just done another episode with a guy called Matt Alder, and we were talking about AI, and it's worth a listen. He's more in the talent attraction space, but there were some things in there that were really interesting we talked about, and one of them was, with new technology comes a new mindset change or that's needed, and also the different changes in job roles. So he was talking, in terms of talent acquisition, his view, his prediction is that a lot of the roles are going to be around process and process improvement, and keeping an eye on evolving candidate behaviour and things like that, as opposed to what they are currently, which is speaking to candidates and processing applications, etc. And one of his big advices was to not listen to the people who are pitching the software and telling you the dream, but is to go and learn and find out as a neutral and think about the problems that you want to fix, that you think you could fix, and then you would look at what the solutions are that are out there. It's a really, really interesting conversation actually, but because it is a potential minefield, and I think there's a lot of fear there. But I think for me, the most important thing would be the change of mindset to be able to embrace it properly. And the other thing that I'd just say is at the beginning of the episode, we were talking about organisations that have got AI right, and he named a few sectors, but healthcare wasn't in there, surprisingly not.
Yeah,
and that's what we've got to change.
Yeah, I would maybe if a certain degree of shameless self advertising here, I would happily consult with a healthcare organisation that wanted to look at, particularly in the mental health space, but it could be elsewhere, if they wanted to look at using AI to augment quality and innovation. So please don't get in touch if you want to replace people. I'm not into that. Ethically, it's not work I want to do. There are many other people that will take your money for that, but it won't be me. But if we want to augment and improve nursing medical processes, because I've got a few ideas, Rowan, as you would always imagine, but at the minute they're confined to my notepads.
Matt, on the episode we did about AI, I really like what he said about you look at a process, and you find the right place for humans in it, which means you're not having technology as a silver bullet. And I love what he said about not listening to the tech providers for advice, but just get plugged into it more. And I think this is applicable for across different professions in health and social care, is just get your head around it more, see it applied in everyday life, and then start to think about, well, what would this mean and how this could be adapted to the situation that I'm in when I'm going to work all the time.
Yeah, so I think really what we're talking about here from the report is the obvious but very public acknowledgement that things are bad. They've got worse. Public confidence in the NHS is at historical lows. Staff confidence at the NHS is at historic levels. And that in many ways, I see this report as a call to action. And it's sometimes stating the obvious is absolutely required. And I think that this report goes a long way. You'll remember from my first appearance a few months ago, where I thought that Wes Streeting made a very bold and ambitious initial statement, but I think he was quite right to make it. And I always come on this caveat that I am non-partisan, so I don't align to any political party. I do vote, I do get involved politically, but I'm not Tory, I'm not Labour, I'm not Lib Dem. I've had dealings with all the different parties, so I kind of take things as I see them and usually try and offer a level of objective critique and analysis. But I thought Wes Streeting in this case was quite right to do so. To me, this is the natural extension. I think it would be sensible as a final wrapping up point, Chris, just to say that when this happens, it's quite natural for us to then just focus on the NHS, and we lose sight of the greater and wider systemic picture. That healthcare really is another it's really a reflection of the state of our society, and it's a key part of that. We should too think about social care and where it's at, the criminal justice system and the probation services and where they're at, the court system and where they're at, the economy. All these things will interact very closely. And I think we should probably take a degree of grave introspection to all work really hard and look to build a country that was better than maybe what we had. I'm really cautious and skeptical that in the interest of responding to this report, we just try and go back to the Tony Blair government. We need to be better. Whatever we need to create needs to be better than what we've had before. Why? Because that's an innovative mindset rather than an improvement mindset.
Have you got a mic you can drop? That's all.
No, it's here, but it's like fixed on this big metal stand. It's horrific. If I dropped it would break everything. I did think about having some fireworks, but I just thought it might set off the smoke alarm. And
cheers, Dean. Look, it's always a pleasure. This won't be the last time we're chatting for sure. So look, really appreciate it. It's always good to get. We've done an article about the report out on engaged care talent. We tapped into the BBC newscast episode talking about it. So anyone who's interested, go there, and also just make sure you subscribe as well. And look, we look forward to getting you back on, Dean, and continue these kind of conversations. It's really valuable. Really appreciate it.
Brilliant. Thank you. Always a pleasure, guys, and always appreciated. Thank you.
See you soon.